Hi everyone, welcome to Infinite Audit Talk. KPMG research in 2016 mentioned that the findings reveal a gap between what audit committees and their client want and what they get from the internal audit. The biggest gap is, based on the research, is in risk management. Only 22% of respondents say that they get help assessing risk, and 57% said that that would be the most valuable to get, which is they haven't get yet. So today we will talk about how to add value in auditing. And first thing first, before we talk about it, Gracie Kabunga Silvana and Mbak Nur Emratan Solihat will talk about what is the most basic thing about how to add value in auditing. This is about why value adding is important. So, what do you think about why value adding is important?
Okay, hello Bunga. Hello everyone. Good to see you again. And today I'm truly happy that finally we will have an episode of Infinite Audit Talk in English. Yay! Applause to us. And um, anyway, regarding what Bunga has mentioned before, thanks for the interesting questions. That an internal audit function should add value to an organization is generally accepted principle. I believe our auditees expect we will add value, right? So we can say that purely checking compliance or being a police, a watchdog is no longer relevant when it comes to the audit function. In the past, value adding was not considered an integral part of auditing, not in the center of it. Audit activities mainly look like a police officer instead of a strategic partner or nah, to sustain its relevance. Then there was a huge transition now that auditors' core mission is to add value to the organization and contribute positively toward the achievement of our client goals. If I'm not mistaken, I remember that the IAA, or Institute of Internal Auditors, itself defined that auditing is an activity that is designed to add value. Yeah. So I think that's why value adding is really important in our audit function. And I think getting your questions, Bunga, thank you. Because even professional body consider value as the main reason we exist. So I think I mentioned in one of my article that judgment is the heart of it. And if I may call adding value something that may be the soul of audit. So if your question is if value adding is so important to auditing, I'm gonna say that it's the soul of auditing. Without it, then there is no essential reason audit activities
Okay.
exist. Imagine a body losing its soul. It's the same with auditing losing the value adding role. So yeah, that's essential. Okay, Bunga, and my questions to you is, how to improve in auditing? This is an interesting question. So I think can give me an insight on how to add value in auditing.
Well, how to add value in auditing. If we are talking about how to add value in auditing, in my very own view, the answer may vary depending on the organization environment. Why? Of course, it's because of the internal audit profession has a long called upon itself to add value to the organization it serves. I do believe that internal auditing is not just about testing control, all the compliance stuff, and issuing reports or judgment about organization condition. But going deeper, we are expected to use our unique position within the organization to capture a comprehensive view of the company and provide valuable guidance on the strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities that the organization must navigate in order to succeed their goals. And going deeper, challenge about the adding value. What do you think about the challenge in adding value in terms of internal auditing?
Wow. Thanks. That's again an interesting question. So we already talk about why it's important, and internal auditing more value adding challenges. So I think the biggest challenge is that value is an abstract thing. It's not easy to define it or simply what is considered as a value for the organizations or our stakeholder. And then value is on our interest. So the value may not consider it to be. I believe that each of our stakeholders has a different expectation of the value that we can deliver. And in real life, it's truly hard, right? It's truly hard to know the value that means the most for our stakeholders. So in the end, we have to admit that value doesn't necessarily mean what we as an auditor think is valuable, but it's what the organization want or expect. And then the next challenge is that how to balance all the stakeholders' expectations. As I mentioned before, each of them has different expectations for us and different approaches and different meaning about value. It's always necessary for auditor to be able to stand in the middle with an unbiased mind and serve the best for the organization. And I think this is I have in mind that an auditor is a human too, right? We are human. We have limitations. We have shortcomings, and to enhance an organization in the best capacity to be in our best capacity too. I think this is why the professional standards state that we have to keep growing and enhance our skills and knowledge, because in the end, we have to serve our best, and to do that, we have to be the best version of auditor we can be. For example, we have to keep ourselves updated about the business processes, the risks around them, and the opportunity that might happen. So I think the challenge also comes from ourselves, that we have to keep moving forward at such a rapid pace. But yes, we are human. We have limitation, and I believe running in such a pace is tiring. Okay, Bunga, I have questions to you. So how internal audit units can position themselves to be a truly value-adding component to their company?
Wow, true value-adding component. Interesting question, but how internal audit can position themselves to be a true value-adding component for their company, or maybe their unit, or maybe their ministry. For the most important one, it's all about high understanding of business acumen or business savvy or business sense, you name it. First thing first, what is basically what we call as a business acumen? Some define it as a keenness and quickness in understanding and dealing with a business situation in a manner that is likely to lead a good outcome. For me, it consists of two key aspects. First one is the business literacy, the knowledge and understanding of various functions within the organization. And the second one is the acumen itself, the ability to make a good judgment and quick decision. Because yes, we live here, I mean, like in a digital era, in a very, very fast moving era. If you hope to contribute something positive to your organization, you need to have a sound understanding of its goals, objectives, and operation. This is not to say that every auditor to be an expert in every aspect of your business. Rather than it's more important to understand the collective strength and weaknesses in your department overall acumen, and to take action in developing the knowledge internally or outsourcing to trusted expert where and when it's warranted. And going deeper again, we will talk about like how to add value to the greatest extent. So, Mbak Im, what do you think about it?
Oh, okay. That's actually a hard question, because how to add value itself is it's already a tricky question, and then how to add value, then it's So I think I need to think again. Okay, but I think the very first is about selecting the topics, the right topics to be evaluated. I mean, we have to be focused on strategic things, keep our eyes fixed on the things that are truly essential rather than wanting to do something interesting, for example. So don't be easily distracted, and also use a helicopter view instead of just the ground level view. I think the next is it's highly popular among auditors that we have to perform risk-based audit activities by concentrating on the areas with the highest risk, with the most significant impact on the organization. We can add the most significant value. And then I think the number three is listening. As its original word, audire, which means to hear, we have to listen to our stakeholders' need and requirement, because it's not necessarily true that what we thought is critical, important is what truly critical and important based on their perspective. And then the next, you mentioned about technology. So yeah, agility or flexibility plays an important role here. We need to assess the emerging risks, keep ourselves ahead of our organization competitors, for example. In understanding the risk, we need to keep everyone in check and updated about the risks and opportunities. And then assist the needed. Please identify what rules suit the process best. For example, in the first stage of everything, I believe assurance isn't always necessarily needed. Instead, we can play a consulting role, for example. And this is the last. It's so important, I think, to leverage technology, automate what can be automated, perform a continuous audit instead of just periodic audit, so we can provide timely assurance or insight. And even with data analytics, now we can offer predictive and prescriptive, which will provide a great value to the organization. I think, yeah, that's what I have in mind. Okay, Bunga, I'm gonna ask you a questions again. How to provide in-depth insight for the client?
Wow, how to provide in-depth insight for the clients. I do believe that internal audit benefits from a unique view across all areas of a business to understand how the processes fit together from one department or one unit to the next one. Whilst it is key for auditors to provide in-depth insight when it comes to risk. This must go beyond simply looking at those that are most immediate to also consider those that are new and emerging. By working in an agile manner to continually identify threats and weaknesses in high risk areas, internal auditors can prevent both costly mistake and reputational damage. And yeah, that's maybe like the key ideas how to provide in-depth insight for the units of our clients. And by let's talking about what basically we need to support the value adding internal audit concept. What do you think about it?
Oh, again, you always have hard questions for me. Okay, I think for auditors, you already mentioned before that we have to truly understand the organization. So yeah, this is like the basic thing that we have to do to support the value adding concept. And then we have to ensure the support from the board, mainly from the board, to maintain the independence, because independence is something that is play an important role to make an internal audit can provide more value. And then make sure that we conform to the standard, because the quality of audit will be guaranteed if we conform to the standard. And then also nurture a relationship with all the stakeholders, include the auditees, our clients. And then also don't forget to put ourselves in the auditees' shoes. we have to like think also from their perspective. And I think this is also important to purposefully communicate how we add value. In the end, communication is so important, right? So communicate how communicate on how we can add value to the organization. They could identify the opportunity on how they can best use the audit function. Also, we should communicate what we have already done, which is also, this is, I think, so important. Walk the talk. For example, if we want the organization to adopt ethical behavior, for example, we need to serve as the role model. Yeah, auditor have to serve as role models. And then this is the last, maybe from me, for the auditee, the willingness to listen. So auditor need to listen, but the auditee also need to listen. So the auditee should have a big heart to listen and implement recommendation if it's needed. I mean, yeah. So even for audit, you have to listen to if auditor says something. Okay, Bunga, I'm gonna ask you hard questions. Let me think. Let me think something hard. Okay. What are the key elements of value adding internal auditing? What do you think?
Oh, okay. What are the key elements of what value-based internal auditing?
Mm.
Well, let me think first about it. What I have in mind, the first thing first is we have to make sure the value-based internal auditing approach. I mean, like we can choose what kind of approach that we need or organization need. But what I think about the value-based internal auditing approach is we need to have a key agent of change in the organization, because yes, we have like a lot of challenges. I mean, like in organizational life. So key agent of change, can help us to go through the challenge. We cannot talk about seamless, but yeah, at least we go like deeper for that. And the second one is continuous risk assessment. We talk about risk assessment at, at a time, but continuous risk assessment is, like in this kind of era is really, really important, because we have to know about the real condition exactly, like every single day, every single week, and that's become much, much more important nowadays. And the second one is the technology. Mayim already mentioned also previously, automated audit management software, audit committee, secure portal, maybe like the technology assurance strategy, new technology, and maybe like in our unit, we also use a Teamit Plus right now. And the last factors that I thought is stakeholder relation. I mean, like this is like the soul itself for the value-based internal auditing. We can use a partnership model, advisory services. I mean, like maybe we also can provide a service catalog for the not compliance things, for the maybe like like for the things that not really like kind of investigating or some things like that. And last thing that I believe important in stakeholder relation is how we constantly have a stakeholder feedback. This is maybe one of the most important thing that sometimes we don't really put it into priority. And yeah, that's the three things about the key elements of value-based internal auditing that I think we have to priority first. And basically my aim, this is our session today. So everyone, thank you so much for having us in Infinite Audit Talk, this episode about how to add value in auditing. Don't forget to follow us in Infinite Audit talk next episode. And don't forget, if you have any kind of thoughts or ideas, or maybe any issues that need to be discussed, please drop your comments in the chat column or the comments column here in YouTube. Thank you so much, and see you next week. Bye. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Bunga. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
See you again
everyone.
in the next episode. I'm gonna give you future hearts.